Lord, forgive me, yeah. Lord, forgive me, yeah. I see the times I lied. I see the times I cried. You said walk by you sometimes. I strayed away from you. I looked at the worst I do. Like, Lord, forgive me, yeah. And for what remains of my life, please walk it with me, yeah. If I'm on my way down and out of control, the devil warring with me, yeah. I know way down and in my soul that you warring with me, hey. And for all my impurities, Lord, forgive me, yeah. Oh, for all my iniquities, Lord, forgive me, yeah. If I'm on my way down and out of control, no devil.
Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year for the Jewish people. This is the time of year when most Jews show up for services, or at least more than usual. In big cities, you sometimes even need tickets. The place gets pretty crowded. To prepare, during the days before the holiday, people make amends and ask forgiveness from their family and friends, and then the day arrives. We learn, on this day you are to afflict your soul, and Yom Kippur makes atonement for you and all Jewish people. So, how do you afflict your soul? Famously, by fasting from food and drink. There are other prohibitions too. No bathing, perfume, sex, or wearing leather. It's a lot of stuff you can't do. Fasting and praying, though, are not enough, as Yom Kippur demands that Jews also commit to changing their behavior. As it says in the Haftorah reading from the prophet Isaiah, an empty fast is not sufficient. This is the fast I desire, to share your bread with the hungry, to take care of the poor, to clothe the naked, and to not ignore our fellows. Traditionally, you spend the entire evening and next day at prayer services. There's many ways that people actually do this holiday. Some people create their own rituals, taking a contemplative walk, or fasting at home. Yom Kippur begins with a service just before sunset called Kol Nidre. You'll notice it's the one time a year where people wear a prayer shawl or talit at night, and many are dressed in white. Kol Nidre is a public apology in advance for failing to meet our own vows and admitting we're not perfect. The chanting of this stirring melody is the beginning of a marathon that ends 25 hours later. The evening, morning, and afternoon services that follow each contain special passages. Importantly, people chant confessions, called vidui, silently as well as out loud. Readers chant from Leviticus about the scapegoat ceremony that atoned for people's misdeeds, as well as the book of Jonah, about the prophet who ran away from God and eventually changed his ways. There's a memorial service called Yizkor. Yom Kippur is a time for relationship maintenance, requiring Jews to seek out reconciliation with others, with themselves, and with God. The imagery of the holiday is of gates, the gates of prayer, of soul-searching, and of forgiveness, which are closed at the final service, Ne'ilah, or locking of the gates. There's another metaphor, being written in the Book of Life on Rosh Hashanah and now being sealed in the very same book on Yom Kippur. You might hear people say, Gemar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good new year. As Ne'ilah concludes, the shofar is sounded in a dramatic closing ceremony. With the final blast, the ups and downs of a really long day come to a full stop. It's chow time. Time to eat as Jews gather together for break the fast. Not breakfast, because it's at night. Like any good cleanse, Yom Kippur leaves you feeling wrung out like a sponge, having gone along a spiritual journey, refreshed and renewed, ready to begin again with a clean slate. Gemar Chatima Tova.
Welcome back to Whiteboard Finance. My name is Marco and I'm here to help you master your money and build your wealth. Today we're talking about how to manage your money using the 50-30-20 rule. So you may be wondering what the 50-30-20 rule is. So as always, let's write this down so we can get a visual representation of what this means. So pretend that we have a pie right here, and half of this pie, which is the 50%, actually stands for your needs. So again, this is all about budgeting and understanding where your money is going and an ideal personal budget portfolio. So 50% are needs. Let's call this 30% are going to wants, and then 20% is going to savings or paying off debt. So now that you have a visual representation, let's break down each one of these numbers and give you examples of each so that you can be gauging your own personal finance based on these metrics. Keep in mind, we're working with after-tax dollars, which is called net income. So you may have a gross pay of, let's say, 50 grand a year, but after taxes, you're only dealing with another specific number. We're using that after-tax dollar number. So in terms of the 50% needs, what are some things that can be included in this? So let's think about regular living expenses. So we have groceries, we have housing, whether you have a mortgage or rent, you have insurance for health. Heaven forbid something happened to you, I would consider health insurance definitely a need. You can have utilities, so electricity, things like that, etc., etc. So the way I define a need is that it's basically something that would greatly inconvenience you or something that you literally cannot live without. So food, shelter, things like that. So when you budget 50% towards your needs, remember that those are what you're looking at. So the next logical area to go into is going to be what is really considered a want. And I think this is where most Americans run into the difference between wants and needs, okay? So a want is something that causes a minor inconvenience in your life, okay? It's not necessarily a need to where, hey, if I don't eat or if I don't have shelter, I may die, right? A want is something where it's like, hey, you know, am I willing to give a minor inconvenience like dropping Netflix or not having Hulu or not buying a brand new grill to grill a steak on? You know, those are needs, okay? So some of the things that would fall under this category would be things like shopping. Do you absolutely need to shop for brand new clothes right this second? Are you going to drop dead if you don't get a new pair of shoes? Maybe my wife will, but I know that I can survive. You know, dining out. I think this is a big one for Americans. A lot of people, for whatever reason, their lifestyles are so busy that, you know, it's easier just to jump in the car and go grab something to eat rather than preparing the food yourself. Hobbies. So I think that everyone should definitely have a hobby. That's one of the greatest joys of life, whether it's gardening, you know, you fly drones, you're a video editor, whatever you want to do, whatever keeps you happy as a hobby, this definitely falls under a want because it's not necessary to live. So again, guys, a want is something that you don't necessarily need, but it improves the quality of your life greatly. So let's go to the last 20%. And I know a lot of this sounds basic, but until you actually write this down and understand where all your money is going to, it's like your wants can easily creep into that needs category to where they're both overflowing and you're in debt every month. So speaking of debt, let's talk about savings, okay? So savings and paying off debt. This is where the last 20% of your income should go to. And again, these are all net numbers. So if you have, let's say for example, an emergency fund, okay? This I would consider savings. What I like to do for emergency funds, this is 6 to 12 months of living expenses. So if you know that your needs category and a little bit of wants comes out to be, let's say $2,000 a month for your entire family, you know that you need to save about $12,000 to $24,000 in your emergency fund. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but you know, 1 or 2 layoffs in a family of 1 or 2 income earners, that can really save your butt right there, you guys. Obviously, paying off debts. So if you have credit cards, student loans, things like that, these are debts that you should just smash using that 20%. And I will make another video about how to actually pay off debt using the debt avalanche and the debt snowball method. Okay? And then obviously, if you want to save for retirement, in my opinion, this is one of the things that most Americans will be suffering from 20, 30 years from now, because a lot of them are just not focusing on retirement savings. So I know a lot of this stuff sounds like common sense, you guys, but until you actually create a monthly budget, knowing what your monthly net income is, breaking it down by 50, 30, and 20%, you would be surprised at where different dollars go for different categories. So unless it's not a want or a need, I would definitely put it under this 20% savings and debt category. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I know that this may not be some earth-shattering information, but again, until you actually write it down and understand where every single one of your after-tax dollars is going, you might be surprised. So I know this.
Your hands up close are anything but smooth. With peaks and valleys, folds and rifts, there are plenty of hiding places for a virus to stick. If you then touch your face, the virus can infect you. But there are two extraordinarily simple ways you can keep that from happening: soap and water and hand sanitizer. So, which is better? The coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is one of many viruses whose protective outer surface is made of a lipid bilayer. These lipids are pin-shaped molecules whose heads are attracted to water and tails are repulsed by it. So, in water-rich environments, lipids naturally form a shell like this, with the heads outside and the tails inside. Their shared reaction to water makes the lipids stick loosely together. This is called the hydrophobic effect. This outer structure helps the molecular machinery of the virus break through cellular membranes and hijack our cells. But it has thousands upon thousands of weak points where the right molecules could pry it apart. And this is where soap comes in. A single drop of any brand of soap contains quadrillions of molecules called amphiphiles, which resemble biological lipids. Their tails, which are similarly repulsed by water, compete for space with the lipids that make up the virus's shell. But they're just different enough to break up the regularity of the virus's membrane, making the whole thing come crashing down. Those amphiphiles then form bubbles of their own around particles including the virus's RNA and proteins. Apply water and you'll wash that whole bubble away. Hand sanitizers work less like a crowbar and more like an earthquake. When you surround a coronavirus with water, the hydrophobic effect gives the bonds within the membrane their strength. That same effect also holds the big proteins that form coronavirus's spikes in place, and in the shape that enables them to infect your cells. If you dry the virus out in air, it keeps its stability, but now surround it with a high concentration of an alcohol, like the ethanol or isopropanol found in most hand sanitizers. This makes the hydrophobic effect disappear and gives the molecules room to move around. The overall effect is like removing all of the nails and mortar from a house and then hitting it with an earthquake. The cell's membrane collapses and those spike proteins crumble. In either method, the actual process of destroying the virus happens in just a second or two, but doctors recommend at least 20 seconds of hand washing because of the intricate landscape that is your hand. Soap and sanitizer need to get everywhere, including your palms, fingertips, the outsides of your hands, and between your fingers to protect you properly. And when it comes to a coronavirus outbreak, doctors recommend washing your hands with soap and water whenever possible. Even though both approaches are similarly effective at killing the virus, soap and water has two benefits. First, it washes away any dirt which could otherwise hide virus particles. But more importantly, it's simply easier to fully cover your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Of course, hand sanitizer is more convenient to use on the go. In the absence of a sink, use the sanitizer as thoroughly as possible and rub your hands together until they're dry. Unfortunately, there are billions of people who don't have access to clean drinking water, which is a huge problem at any time, but especially during an outbreak. Researchers and aid groups are working to provide solutions for these communities. One example is a device that uses salt, water, and a car battery to make chlorinated water that kills harmful pathogens and is safe for hand washing. So wherever possible, soap and water are recommended for a coronavirus. But does that mean it's best for every viral outbreak? Not necessarily. Many common colds are caused by rhinoviruses that have a geometric protein structure called a capsid instead of a lipid membrane. The capsid doesn't have nearly as many weak points where soap amphiphiles can pry it apart, so it takes longer for soap to be effective. However, some of its surface proteins are still vulnerable to the destabilizing effect of hand sanitizer. In this and similar cases, hand sanitizer may be more effective, especially if you then wash your hands to remove residual particles. The best way to know which to use for any given outbreak is to do what's best for all things illness-related. Follow the advice of accredited medical professionals. Need help?
Shouldn't be doing this.
You guys are tough people.
You're wrong.
3 Christians were arrested and 5 were cited by police for not wearing masks or social distancing at a hymn singing event in Moscow, Idaho's City Hall parking lot Wednesday night. One of those arrested was Latah County Commission candidate Gabe Wrench. During the arrest, church members challenged police officers with the idea that by arresting them, they were actually helping enforce tyranny.
At what point do you fight against tyranny? Do you protect your citizens against tyranny?
What order wouldn't you obey? Like, do you have a line? What order would you not obey?
The hymn singing event was organized by Christ Church in Moscow. The pastor of Christ Church is nationally known author and theologian Douglas Wilson, who says the church had every legal and constitutional right to be there and do what we did. Wilson says the odds are good there will be another hymn sing, and they've started a campaign to force a repeal of the city's mask ordinance. Dale Hurd, CBN.
Listen, I am the least likely person in the world to be telling you what I've been telling you. Seek for yourself. I was raised with a scientific outlook to research, see whether something is true or not. It's not about religion, it's not about tradition, it's not about what people told you. In the end, it's only going to be about you and God. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. Ask and it will be given. God is there to show himself to you. Seek him, and you will find.
Heaven, you know, so Lord, Lord, forgive me. Lord, forgive me. Lord, forgive me, yeah. Lord, forgive me. Lord, forgive me, yeah. Lord, forgive me, yeah. Lord, forgive me, yeah. Lord, forgive me.